This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Supreme Court's deeply troubling decision in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. No, this is as good as I'm going to do. That decision has resulted in the corrosion of our democracy, giving a disproportionate weight to moneyed interests and drowning out the voices of ordinary Americans. Today's hearing will examine the extent of this corrosion and explore ways to repair the damage that the flood of dark money into our political system has wrought as a result of that decision. In Citizens United, the Supreme Court struck down as unconstitutional a ban on corporations and unions using their general treasury funds to make independent expenditures, expressly advocating for the election or defeat of a candidate. Essentially, the court held, wrongly in my view, that this ban on independent expenditures violated corporations' First Amendment free speech rights. Citizens United represented an unjustified extension of Buckley versus Vallejo, Supreme Court decision in 1976 that had struck down limits on independent expenditures by individuals. In handing down its decision in Citizens United, the Supreme Court overturned decades-old precedents that held that the government could regulate outside spending by corporations and unions. The negative effect of Citizens United was immediately apparent. The same year that the Supreme Court decided Citizens United, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the U.S. District decided Speech Now Org versus FEC, striking down federal limitations on contributions by individuals to political committees that only made independent expenditures. Taken together, these two decisions resulted in the rise of the so-called super political action committees, or super PACs. Because of these decisions, individuals and corporations can make unlimited contributions to PACs dedicated only to making independent expenditures, whose donors' disclosure rules are much more opaque, allowing them to accumulate massive amounts of dark money. It's now 10 years later, and we are seeing the negative corrosive effects of a decade of permitting wealthy mega donors and corporations pouring unlimited amounts of money into our elections. Perhaps now more than ever, many Americans believe that their elected leaders do not care about them, the politicians only care about raising money, and the people that fund those super PACs that help get them elected. Prioritizing narrow interests of the money classes or corporations in the political system, people feel is rigged against them. They believe their voices will be drowned out come the election by the megaphones bought by dark money. Megaphones as if they are speech. Example after example shows they are right. For instance, most Americans, including most gun owners, support universal background checks for gun purchases. According to a 2018 Quinnipiac University poll, almost all Americans, including 97% of gun owners, support universal background checks. Despite the fact that enacting universal background checks would be overwhelmingly popular, the Grim Reaper, Senator also known as Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, has so far refused to take up H.R. 8, the Bipartisan Background Checks Act, which the House passed nearly a year ago. Perhaps not surprisingly, since 2016, the National Rifle Association has spent more than $54 million on outside spending efforts, including $34 million raised from its dark money arm. That's a lot of money and has a big impact on who wins elections and influences the opinions on gun ownership. Similarly, Americans overwhelmingly support lowering prescription drug prices. According to the Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation poll, more than 70% of Americans believe drug costs are unreasonable and that drug companies are putting profits before people. Similarly, a study conducted by Politico and the Harvard School of Public Health found that 92% of Americans favor lowering the rate for prescription drugs as an important health policy priority. Even President Trump, during his show of shows, also known as the State of the Union, address earlier this week in a speech that could otherwise best be described as a campaign rally, masquerading as a reality TV show, called on Congress to pass a bill to dramatically lower drug prices. Yet for years, Congress has done nothing. Why? It probably has something to do with pharmaceutical companies' army of lobbyists, backed up by massive amounts of dark money raised by allied super PACs. Sadly, I can name policy after policy area, from climate change to Wall Street regulations meant to avert another economic meltdown, where Americans overwhelmingly believe that Congress should take action. Yet Congress has failed to take such action when confronted by massive and targeted outside spending by dark money organizations. And the people that benefit from that are the leaders of the Senate and leaders of the House. And generally, they are not going to favor giving up a tool that gives them more power, particularly on the side that has the most money. The very real danger here is the American people, convinced that their voices will be drowned out by mega donors and corporate interests, will lose faith in the enterprise of self-government and indeed turn to demagogic and anti-democratic forces. It is for this reason that I support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, while I'm a co-sponsor of H.J. Res. 2, the Democracy for All Amendment, and thank Chairman Representative Deutsch for working so hard on that for many, many years. Passing a constitutional amendment is one way to bring the dark age of the super PAC to a definitive close. But also urge Leader McConnell to take up H.R. 1 for the People Act, which I believe Representative Sarbanes championed, which would enact reforms that would expose dark money donors. And I thank Representative Jayapal for all of her work on this issue as well, and she has another bill that goes a little further. Passing a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United should be our ultimate goal. In the meantime, however, Congress should take whatever action it can to stop the flow of dark money into our elections that threatens to erode even further the American people's faith in democratic self-government. I look forward to our witnesses' testimony, and I thank them all for appearing here and all the citizens that have been involved in this issue. And I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Johnson, for his opening statement.